Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a final year medical student at Cambridge University, and in this video we're going to be hearing from myself and 7 of my medical student friends about their experiences of the Cambridge interview. So if you're applying to Cambridge, or Oxford for that matter, for medicine, you might find this useful to kind of hear from various medical students about what their experiences were like. First thing to say is that, to be honest, it's quite repetitive. Everyone has broadly a similar experience in that they enjoy their interview and it's quite sciencey, academic. They ask you questions about stuff that you know, but then they ask you questions about stuff you don't know and they try and teach it to you and just kind of see what happens, see how you think, you want to be thinking out loud, all of that stuff. So this is quite a long video. Everyone kind of says the same thing, but I know that when me and my friends were applying, we would have taken an orchidectomy just to hear Cambridge students talk about their interviews. So hopefully you won't have to resort to that. You can just watch this video and you can hear from various medical students about what their Cambridge interviews were like. We've got some tips littered throughout this video about how you can prepare for it, things you can do on the day and so on. But we've got a dedicated video about tips for the Oxbridge interview coming out within the next few days as well. So by the time you're watching this, it's probably out on the channel, so have a look at that. It'll be linked down below. But yeah, here we go. We're just going to run through and we'll have 8 medical students talking about their tips for the Cambridge interview. I really hope you find it useful.
I actually loved my Cambridge interview. I came out of it thinking that was like the funnest day I've ever had.
Oh wow.
Probably not ever. Ali, don't put that in, that's one. No, I came out thinking that I had a really good time. You walk into these rooms, you have these really comfy sofas, you sit down and you're just chatting with these awesome people.
Yeah.
And it is challenging, but I kind of almost, I really didn't think I was going to get in, so I was like, I'm just going to try and have fun, and I had nothing to lose at that point, so I was like, you know, I'm just doing this for a test for me.
The first thing to say is I really enjoyed it. It was probably the most enjoyable interview of the 4 that I had, and it was like, they were kind of asking questions that I vaguely knew the answer to, but kind of exploring the topics in a depth that I hadn't covered before. So I had to think a lot for myself, and it wasn't really an interview in the traditional sense that I was expecting. I was expecting it to be, you know, these old men kind of seated behind a desk, throwing questions at me and me having to kind of answer in a very formal fashion. I don't know, you know, the whole Cambridge stereotype. But in reality, it was quite friendly. They were still quite old men, but it was kind of in a lounge living room setting with like comfortable sofas, and it seemed very relaxed. And it wasn't so much as them interrogating me as a sort of two-way conversation. So they'd ask a question, I'd respond, they'd respond to that. They would kind of teach me a little bit of a topic that I didn't know, and then they'd ask a follow-up question. So it honestly did feel a lot like a teaching session, and 5 years in, having been at Cambridge for the last 5 years, I can say that the interview was quite similar to what our small group supervisions are like, where, you know, you start with a topic and the supervisor teaches you something and then they ask you a question about it, and, you know, it's a very two-way dialogue, and I really liked that aspect of the Cambridge interview.
Okay, so my Cambridge interview was totally different to my other interviews. It was very science-based, science and maths, and so when I turned up it was 2 separate interviews, so that was the first difference, was that you had to wait around sort of all day, and you were interviewed by 2 separate groups of people. The first one I had, I found really difficult. I went in and it was sort of using maths techniques, looking at graphs, interpreting them, and then also sort of extrapolating from that and seeing what you could think in an abstract way as well as in a scientific way. And that one I found quite difficult because doing maths on the spot is hard for anyone, but I particularly struggle when I'm put under pressure. But actually I got stuff wrong. I kept getting stuff wrong, and they would just guide you through and try to get you to the right answer in the end, and I think that's what they're looking for, really. They're looking for someone who can get things wrong and recover from it and keep going and learn from them, because in the end these are the people who will be your tutors, these are the people who will teach you, and if they can't teach you in an interview situation, then they're not going to be able to teach you when you actually come here. So don't be afraid of getting stuff wrong, just have a go and really try and use your sort of first principle knowledge of your basic biology, maths, chemistry, physics, all of those, in order to get to some sort of answer. And if it's right, great, but if it's wrong, it might not be the end of it. My second one was very similar. Again, it was giving me questions and making me think further than I did in my lessons. So it was starting off with something I should have learned, and then getting to somewhere that I had never learnt before. And so they guide you through those steps, and they give you help in order to try and see how much you can do. And again, I only got about halfway through the question in the end, but clearly that's all they wanted, and they wanted to see how your mind works, and that you could speak out loud and show them your steps out loud, and you could learn from your mistakes rather than that you got a perfect answer every time.
It was 2 half-hour science tests, and they were great fun. The interviewers asked me some questions and I answered them, and then they probed and probed and probed until they found something I didn't know, and watched how I responded to not knowing something and trying to work things out from first principles, or from earlier principles that we had established.
So I thought my interview was horrible at the time. I came out thinking like, oh my god, that was horrible, never gonna get in here. It was a really quick interview as well. I was like the last interview, so I remember thinking that they were just really tired, and they were like, you know what, let's just quickly ask him a few questions and get him out. In terms of how it felt doing, a lot of them I found sort of were, as you would expect, unfamiliar content, and really put you on the spot, which ties back into realizing that it's not about knowing the answers right away. It's about sort of keeping your ground, keeping your head, and realizing, okay, they've asked me something I have no idea, but let's think about that, and then sort of work through it, and talk to them about what you're working through. And I think that's how really you would shine a bit more in an interview.
Yeah.
It was also really, really friendly. I had 4 interviewers across 2 interviews. They were all really polite, really, really nice. They smiled, they shook my hand, and I genuinely felt that, you know, they wanted to be there, like interviewing me, as weird as that sounds. So that did a lot towards putting me at ease, because I was like super nervous when I went in there, as I'm sure everyone is. But the fact that they were smiling and shaking hands and kind of making little jokes here and there, it really helped. So yeah, I loved my Cambridge interview, and you know, I would, you know, unreservedly recommend it to anyone applying to medicine.
Because really the Cambridge interview is sort of like a little supervision, which is sort of the small group teaching we have here, where they push you, they ask you questions. You don't always know the answer, but you work together, you think out loud, bounce ideas off each other, and that just makes it quite a good learning process. Yeah, so if anything, it's sort of like a pilot into seeing how well you would do with that sort of learning experience here in Cambridge.
And if anything, you get a free lunch in a nice college.
I think
that's
free
always
lunch.
Nice.
I suppose mine was at the end of the day. Yeah.
It wasn't a sort of alternative, weird, out there as some people would have you believe. It was a thorough testing of the basic sciences. The first one was a bit more clinical, so it would ask me questions about medical problems that I at least could have had a reasonable insight into for my stage of education. And I had questions about sort of what it was to be a good doctor from a professional point of view. In my second one, that was a bit more about the basic sciences, so I got some sort of genetics questions, I got some organic chemistry questions, and it was all stuff that, you know, the entry level into the question was accessible for anybody who just knew their AS level syllabus fine. So as long as you know, you can make mistakes under pressure and still get away with it, but as long as you kind of just relaxed and did yourself justice with that, then you at least, you have an inlet into the questions. It's not in their interest to just ask you stuff you don't know. They want to see how much you know to start with, and then what's more important is how much they can teach you and how receptive you are to learning over the course of the interview. So don't worry if you get to a point where you can't answer anything any further, because that's essentially where they're trying to get to.
So my Cambridge interview is very academic. We started off by talking about why medicine, as usual. I thought that these were quite perfunctory questions, in the sense that it was just literally to screen people who might be a bit awkward or weird or haven't really thought through their answers. But then after that, the real meat of the interview is about the way which you think. And so I got a lot of questions. I got a huge number of questions which were scientific in nature and and it's kind of like a dance really between the interviewer and the interviewee, where the interviewer tries to get the interviewee or get me to build on my knowledge, my existing knowledge, and push the implications of that knowledge one step at a time until I got to the right answer. The first question which I got was a probability question. Please calculate the probability that this drug will not work. Yeah, so it's along those lines, very scientific, very mathsy.
So I had 2 interviews. The first one was a sort of general interview that I think a lot of people are prepared for, so I don't want to give too many specific questions, but again, it's a sort of like why medicine, why Cambridge, what you will expect. They're going to ask you why you're applying for the subject and why you're applying to the specific university or college. So that was kind of my general interview, and kind of talking about things that I'd put on my personal statement. So I'd mentioned a few books that I'd read and some experiments that I'd done, so they kind of that sort of thing. My science interview was a bit of a mess. I will say that nothing that I was asked in my science interview I had ever covered before. A lot of the stuff I was asked in my science interview I didn't cover until my 3rd year at Cambridge, so going with the expectation that they're not going to ask you anything that you know, because that's kind of what they want to do. They want to see how you think and not just what you've memorised, and that was very much what it was. It was working through questions where there was no way that I would have known the answer beforehand. I just had to work through it with them and show them how I think and how I reasoned. If you want to see any of those particular questions, I do have a video on my channel where I've basically go through the questions in that interview.
So thank you for watching. That was 8 medical students talking about their experiences of the Cambridge interview. As I said at the start, it really is quite repetitive, which is a good thing because it means that everyone has the same interview experience and that you're not going to get thrown curveballs like things I've seen in newspapers, like they throw a rugby ball out of a window and ask you to respond and weird stuff like that. They just don't do that. That's just completely mythical. No one has that experience. Everyone has broadly the same experience, which is good for people applying because you kind of know what to expect. So please do keep a lookout for the video that we've got coming out very soon, if not already, about tips for the Oxbridge interview. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. We've got videos about interview, BMAT, stuff like that. And I also vlog every now and then about life as a final year medical student. So thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.